The 2nd of November 2022 is a day that will forever be etched in the annals of aviation. History not because it dawned with any particular promise or beauty, but because it bore witness to one of the deadliest accidents in India's aviation sector. The tragedy I am referring to is the Charkhi Dadri mid-air catastrophe, which claimed the lives of at least 136 people. It was an incident that sent shockwaves across the country and the world. This accident involved two aircraft. The DGCA issued Air India Express Flight 1344 and Indigo Airlines Flight 6372, Flight 1344, was operating a scheduled domestic passenger flight from Surat to Mumbai, and Flight 6372 was on a similar route from Mumbai to Surat. The Surat airport was experiencing heavy fog at the time, and so the two planes were put on a holding pattern, while the airport authorities struggled to get things under control. A holding pattern is basically where planes are kept in the air until there is enough visibility for them to land. While they were waiting to land, the two pilots forgot about the rules of the game. They violated standard operating procedures and inadvertently entered the same airspace. The next thing we know, Flight 6372 ran into the belly of Flight 1344. As the two planes collided in midair, they literally split into pieces. Some parts fell over residential areas near the airport, showering debris and death on unsuspecting civilians. The pilots of both flights and 134 passengers perished instantly. There were 27 survivors. And in this story, I want to focus on one survivor who gave a first-hand account of what went down that fateful day. This is the only survivor from Flight 6372, and according to him, here is what happened. His name has been withheld by the authorities for obvious reasons. It was around 3:30 p.m. when the pilot announced to the passengers that, due to bad weather, their landing would be delayed by 10 minutes. About 10 to 15 minutes later, there was another announcement. It's time from the co-pilot saying that they were making one more attempt to land, and if that failed, they would have to divert to another airport. Then came the third announcement, and this one shattered the calm like a bomb. The co-pilot said, "Mayday, Mayday, we are holding, which means we are on hold and are unable to land," said he could hear panic in his voice. Immediately after the co-pilot made the announcement, the plane suddenly dropped from a height of 10,000 feet to 3,000 feet. It was so sudden and so sharp that he felt his stomach drop to the floor. When he regained his senses, he looked out of the window and realized that they had split into two halves. One half of the plane was missing, so was the left side of his seat. He tried to figure out what had just happened and saw debris falling from the plane in front of them. That's when he noticed the other plane. He remembered seeing its fuselage and the words Indigo written on it. In a flash, everything made sense to him. They had crashed into another plane. Looking at the other plane, he realized that they had hit it at such an angle that it tore the plane apart. The impact was so forceful that he found himself flung out of the plane and plummeting towards the ground. Luckily, he managed to pull his parachute and land safely. But almost everyone on the other plane was dead. When he recounted the story later, he was haunted by the sight of a little girl hanging by her parachute. She was maybe 8 years old, said she was screaming at the top of her lungs, "I want to live. Please save me." He also told the investigators that he saw a woman carrying a baby in her lap. Both of them were dead, suffered serious injuries to his right leg and right arm, and was rushed to a hospital. When he regained consciousness, doctors told him that he would never walk again. But somehow he knew he would defy those odds. Every time he looked at the doctors, he asked them the same question, "Can I walk again?" And every time they gave him the same answer. But he refused to believe them. In the weeks following the accident, he underwent multiple surgeries and grueling physiotherapy sessions. Today, he can walk with the help of crutches. There are several lessons to be learned from this tragic accident. Let us start with the most important one. How did two planes end up in the same airspace? Who gave the clearance for this? According to preliminary investigations, both pilots were well within the corridor they had been given. But the problem arose when the pilots of Flight 6372 decided to descend lower. You see, the airspace had been divided into two corridors. One extended from 2,500 feet to 3,500 feet. The other was between 3,500 feet and 10,000 feet. Once the pilots of Flight 6372 decided to descend to 2,500 feet, They should have switched frequencies, but they did not. Instead, they stayed on the same frequency as the other plane, which had been cleared to descend to 3,500 feet. This meant that both planes were in the same airspace. Should not have been. The second question is, why didn't the planes avoid each other? To explain this, I need to tell you about something called the TCAS system. It stands for Traffic Collision Avoidance System. Basically, if two planes are on a collision course, this system helps them avoid each other. The TCAS warns the pilots with visual and auditory warnings, and it helps them take evasive action. But here, the system failed to warn the pilots. Reports say the TCA's alerts were drowned out by the noise in the cockpit. Plus, the pilots were already aware that there was another plane in the vicinity. So the TCA's warnings probably did not come through. But that still leaves us with one very important question. Why did the planes collide in the first place? You see, there are two ways in which planes can collide. One is when they are flying in the same direction but at different altitudes. In this case, the planes are flying in opposite directions. Pilots of Flight 6372 spotted Flight 1344 at the very last moment, just before the crash. But by then it was too late. They tried to take evasive action, but it was of no use. Here's what the pilot of Flight 6372 said. "When we were at 10,000 feet, we saw the other plane directly in front of us. I immediately called out SA, which means see and avoid. This is a standard call in aviation to alert the pilots of another aircraft. I told the pilots to take evasive action, but it was too late. The plane was right in front of us. I tried to go around the plane, but it was too close. It all happened very fast." According to investigators, the pilot of Flight 6372 was partially to blame for the crash. The main reason they gave was that he failed to keep a proper lookout. Remember, the other plane had been in the vicinity for quite some time. Investigators say the pilot should have anticipated a collision and taken avoiding action earlier. But this begs another question. Was the pilot at fault here? Well, not entirely. See, the job of a pilot goes beyond flying the plane. They're expected to be experts in meteorology, navigation, and above all, human behavior. Before takeoff, they study weather patterns, wind conditions, visibility, and a host of other things. If the weather is bad, they can ask for a delay in takeoff. They can even cancel a flight altogether. But in this case, the pilots of Flight 6372 had no choice. The weather at the Surat airport was really bad, and they were already running late. Pilots had to stick to the schedule because they had a tight turnaround time. If they missed the slot, they would have to wait for hours to get another one. That's not all. They also had a full load of passengers and cargo. This meant that if the pilots requested for a diversion, their fuel levels would be closely scrutinized. If they did not have enough fuel for the diversion, they would have to return to Mumbai, which was not an option since the runway at Mumbai was closed for repairs. To be honest, there are so many factors that led to this crash that it is difficult to put the blame on one person or factor. What we can do is learn from this tragedy and make sure such mishaps are never repeated. Thank you for watching.